So, okay, Mina, I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this week. It's an interesting week. We are getting a glimpse into a very different lifestyle, very similar to how we got into a glimpse of the celebrity lifestyle in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. What are you taking away from, let's say, the cross-examination of Cassandra Ventura this week and, just generally what she had to say under direct?
I think it's really painting a different side of the relationship. The prosecution did a good job of highlighting some of the volatile things that happened in the relationship, some of the things that might be consistent with what he's being charged with. But the defense is really trying to humanize Diddy and really have it come across that they were in a complicated relationship that we may not understand, something called voyeurism. But they're trying to establish that there was a relationship there, that there were feelings and love there, and just really soften the time that they spent together.
Got a question from Magra VYN54. Jesse, you're looking sharp as always. I didn't add that. It actually says this, just so you know. Jess, thank you very much. Appreciate it. My question is, when can we expect the release of Puff Daddy? So it's interesting here, Mina, because there are people, if you go on X, you go on social media, whose opinions have been swayed during the last several days. They hear Cassandra Ventura's testimony, or at least they're based on the reporting of it, but they're not convinced that Diddy is guilty of these crimes. And I've said it before. This is a very complicated case, racketeering sex trafficking. It's not that the jury can just say, he violently assaulted Cassandra Ventura, he's guilty. No, it's not if he sexually abused her, he's guilty. There are specific elements here, and there are people out there who believe he will be acquitted.
Well, at the end of the day, they are not in the jury pool. So the court of public opinion, I'm sorry to say, but your opinion does not matter.
Well, we hope, by the way, we hope they're not tweeting, during lunch breaks. But, yeah.
Right. But I think that you can't really make an opinion on day 4 of a trial, right? This is supposed to last up to, they're saying, maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 months. Cassie is not, from what I'm hearing, the only alleged victim here. So we have to wait and see what these other witnesses are going to say. There's a Jane Doe that they keep mentioning. There are rumors online of who the Jane Doe is, but we have to wait, right? The federal government does not go after someone without having all their ducks in a row. Cassie, I'm pretty sure, is not the only victim here. They will present other evidence. Let's wait to see what evidence the federal government has, and then you can make your judgments and your opinion.
We got a question here. Here's a question for you, Mina. Madison Thomas asks, I have a question. If Cassie is pregnant, then why is she having to be there?
So, Madison, that is a great question. When the federal government says you have to show up, you don't really have an option here, right? I also think that Cassie recognizes that this is an opportunity for her to tell her story. And it is a story, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how this trial ends up. I think that she is going to be an inspiration to a lot of other victims. There's still a debate whether this is a sex trafficking case or not, but no one can deny that this is not domestic abuse as well. This woman has been abused mentally, physically, financially, and emotionally. And I think for other victims, this is a big moment in where this woman gets to tell her story. So I think that she recognizes that, and despite being weeks away from having a baby, I heard that her due date might be at the top of June. She's in her 3rd trimester. She understands the importance of her making it to court and speaking up for herself and telling her story.
Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize, first of all, they had to get her in there immediately, right? Because she might be giving birth. Alleged victim number 3, they can't find that person, so that becomes a big problem for the prosecution's case. Got a question from Fabia Faiza Abanti. I'll go to you, Mina. What are the things that the defense can use to disprove the power dynamics?
Hi, Fabia is her name?
Fabia.
Hi, Fabia. I don't know what they can use, honestly. It just seems like he has the power. He has the money. He has the influence. He controls her career. I can't believe he signed her to a 10-album deal. Do you know how ridiculous that is? Even if she released an album every year, she would be locked in that recording deal for 10 years. She recorded, according to her testimony, 9 albums worth of music, which weren't released. So he was going to not only lock her in work wise, but also they had a relationship going on. So he had that power. And then you have to remember the age gap. There's a 17-year age gap here. There's always going to be a power dynamic there. He met her
Right.
when she was a teenager. She was 19. So already from the beginning, he's establishing all this power. And I don't know how they're going to disprove that because she doesn't have the money. She doesn't have the control over her career. And she's in a relationship with him in where every time she tries to leave, there's violence, right? She tries to date Kid Cudi. He threatens to blow up his car. Guess what happened? His car blew up. So she can't even move on from this situation without feeling a threat, according to her testimony. So I don't
Yeah.
know how they're going to do that,
I
honestly.
mean, I think they try to suggest that the things that he was doing were in her best interest and he wasn't trying to control her. But I mean, you can't argue the power dynamic. You can't argue who he was and who she was. And even, she said, beginning of her testimony, Sean Combs kind of introduced her to certain sex acts, right? And it's uncomfortable to say, but it's part of the conversation. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Mina, Ben, stand by. We're going to continue the conversation with Mina and Ben once again. Mina, you heard what Elizabeth had to say. It felt, from her perspective, a layperson's perspective, a little disjointed what the questioning is. Ben and I are attorneys. We're trying to figure it out, how they're making the legal arguments. I think I'm getting a sense of where they're going. But what do you think? Is it a little too disjointed?
They're fishing. They're fishing. They're trying to maybe say maybe she had a sex addiction and, or maybe this is the drug's fault, and I think you're right about it's going to come down to closing arguments, right? How do they make sense of everything that we're hearing? Are they going to say that, this was infused by drug abuse and drug use? Are they going to try to use that? Or are they going to say that they were both sex addicts? They have to blame someone, right? The defense has to blame someone other than Diddy or provide an explanation for why these things happened. So they're fishing to try to do that, it seems to me.
This is for you, Mina. This is an interesting one. Bobby Heath. Jesse is the very best at doing sidebar. First of all, thank you. I'm not making this up, by the way. These are the actual compliments that are on here, so I appreciate it.
Whatever,
A question I have, if this is the question, a question I have is if Cassie wasn't 9 months pregnant, would they put her on the stand last to finish strong? What do you think, Mina?
I don't think so. I think that video is so powerful. They have to establish the violence that Diddy is capable of, and then the supporting witnesses will fill in the blanks, right? Also, you have to establish the racketeering part of it and the organized crime part of it. And I think it was really strategic how they started with the bodyguard, the intercontinental bodyguard, in where the bodyguard said, I went there and he threw money at me, and he bought the tape for $50,000 or something like that. And you have to really establish that there's a cover up, right? A cover up that's trying that they're trying to really hide what they're doing. And I think you needed to see it so they can fill in the blanks after that.
Got a question from Lisa Morales. Are we going to see Justin Bieber on the stand? Very funny you should say that, Lisa. No, I don't think we're going to see Justin Bieber on the stand. Particularly, he came out today, Mina,
Yeah.
right, and said that he is not a victim of Sean Combs. So, by the way, we are going to do a sidebar on that. It's going to come out tonight. I'm actually going to record it right after this. But Mina, no, right?
No, he's already put that to rest. That rumor has been running around on social media as well. In fact, social media started pulling up everyone who Diddy has been associated with. Since they were young, Justin Bieber, Usher. I think his attorney made a good point saying, mentioning Justin really takes away from some of the actual victims here, and that we need to focus on those victims. So no, I don't think Justin Bieber is going to be showing up here.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think this is a misnomer and maybe a disappointment for people who thought this was going to be a celebrity-filled trial. Big names are going to be accused. That's not what this is. This is a very particular case with very particular witnesses. Having said that, there is reports that Dawn Richard is going to take the stand after Cassandra Ventura. By the way, you mentioned, one of our viewers kindly mentioned sidebar. I want to just say something real quick. So,
Jesse.
I have to say it. I got to say it. Listen, we're constantly covering this case. We're constantly covering true crime news, and we make this content specifically for our YouTube audience. We just got the word that Sidebar was ranked number 32 in the top 100 podcasts on YouTube, and that is all thanks to you and your support and your viewership. Really, really thank you so much. Listen, not self-promoting, but I'm letting everybody know this is, that we're making this for you guys, and we really appreciate everybody coming to us. Yeah, Mina, because this is the thing, right? This is the thing what I think they have to emphasize. You might have agreed to freak offs at the beginning. You might have agreed to freak offs one at a time. It's like 99% of the time you could say yes, but the 1% you say no, right? That's all that matters, right, Mina?
Right. And that's exactly what I was going to say. They just need to establish the timeline, right? Both of those things can be true. Both of these sides of this relationship can be true. She could have been in a consenting, open relationship, but she also could have been in an abusive relationship in where sexually things were being done to her that she did not want. They just have to establish when those things happened. This is a 10-year on and off relationship. So much can change. I think it's really important to also point out that she started these alleged freak-offs when she was 22, right? At the end, she's in her 30s. Someone that is 22 can agree to something where a 30-year-old might be like, no, I'm not doing that. So they need to really clearly establish the timeline here, because I believe some of these text messages were from 2009. They're very early in their relationship. It's very easy to disapprove all of that, right? Yeah, they were in a consenting relationship at one point, but then it turned left, and then she found herself in a sexual relationship and where she's having multiple partners that she didn't even know, and she was not consenting to that, and she was being blackmailed with these videos. It's very simple to clean up.
Hey, we got a question from Chris Buono. Jesse, will Jonathan Odie be taking the stand, maybe testifying from jail? Chris, I got to tell you, if you told me at the beginning of the case, I would say no. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, his name has come up more times than I thought he was going to. Mina, are we going to, I mean, by the way, his tape from 2018, where he's in the interrogation room and he's like, I was a sex slave of Sean Combs and Cassie, and I was like, oh my gosh. Now it's like, okay, he might have relevant information.
Right, but the thing with him is his credibility, right? He's kind of like a loose cannon a little bit and Jesse, you would know more, but the feel that I get from the videotapes that I've seen, he's kind of like a loose cannon, right? So I think
I would say that's a fair assessment.
Might be an issue here.
Well,
the safest witness is what I'm saying.
Okay, here's a question for you, Mina. This is from Ari. Will Christina Coram, who is Sean Combs', I guess, former chief of staff, and Gene Deal, who at one point was his bodyguard, will they testify?
We don't know. I heard that they have about 100 people on the possible list. That's kind of the interesting thing about court. You could think something's happening or going to happen, and then there's a pivot because of maybe something that was said during testimony or cross. So I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting to hear their side of the story if they're being accused of helping in this alleged racketeering and organized sexual, crime company. It would be interesting to hear what they did. I know that one of them had released a statement stating that she's never aided in any crimes. So I think it would be important to hear their side of the story, because at the end of the day, you do have to prove that organized crime racketeering piece.
Got another question from Chris Bono that I think is great. I'll throw this to you, Ben. Would Cassandra Ventura need to give that money back for any reason? So again, she had that settlement with Sean Combs, now testifying against him. Would she have to give the money back for any reason?
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah. And Mina, you were shaking your head too. No.
And you know what? The fact that he gave that money in under 24 hours also speaks volumes, right?
Yeah, no, it's although I don't know, there are people who've said, and Ben, you go to this, there are people who settle for all different kinds of reasons, right? Ben, they don't just settle because they're guilty of what they're, or, liable for what they're being accused of, if we're talking in a civil sense, but they settle for other reasons. They don't want it to amplify, they don't want to go through litigation, maybe they settle before a lawsuit's filed because they don't want it to go public. We can't just automatically take the settlement to mean that all of this is true, right, Ben? Or what do you think?
Yeah, completely right, Jesse, that people settle for all kinds of reasons to avoid stress, to avoid legal fees, but the quicker the settlement, as Mina pointed out, and the amount of the settlement do speak, the bigger the settlement, the the worse it looks.
Interesting. Okay, got a question for you, Mina. This is from Donnie Darko 99. No one's asking why did she sign the 10-album contract and why did Diddy didn't let her create more albums if that's what she signed to?
Well, Danny, that is a great point. And
Donnie,
I think
Donnie Darko.
Donnie, thank you, Donnie. That's a great point. But I think the prosecution, if I'm right about this, they're going to point out that maybe because the music wasn't important to Diddy. At one point, Cassie did say, "This was my job, these freak offs." So I think the fact that she couldn't really actively participate in her music career because he controlled that, and then she had to participate in these other sexual activities, I think that's actually going to help the prosecution. But you're right, why sign her to this deal? She was also 19, and a lot of young artists sign deals that are not favorable to them. It's very important to have an attorney when you're signing a deal like that. And I don't know if Cassie had that present, but I'm not an attorney, but Ben, you are. I would never allow my client to sign a 10-album deal. I mean, like I said, even if you release the album every year, you would be under a contract for 10 years. That's ridiculous.
Ben would never let that happen, right, Ben?
No, no way.
Mina, you say you're not a lawyer, but you know the law backwards and forwards as much as anybody else. Okay.
Let me say this, though. I went to Syracuse University. I'm a new high school, television, radio, and film, and political science, Jesse. I was almost there, almost. And
you're giving me a hard time about self-promoting sidebar. My gosh, Mina, what is going on here? No, I'm just messing. So, okay, we got a question for you, Mina, from Moose. How long does this case go for?
They're estimating 6 to 8 weeks, so 2 months tops, which I think is pretty fast considering other cases. I mean, Jesse, you and I covered Young Thug, and that went for over a year.
Don't use Young Thug as an example. That was insane. I mean, that shouldn't happen. But it is interesting, Mina, when you think about it and the power of Cassandra Ventura's testimony. There are some attorneys I've spoken to who say, hey, it's great to get her out in first, right? Primacy, recency, one of the first witnesses they hear. Then again, 8 weeks later, that impact of her testimony might fade a bit. No, Mina?
Yeah, I agree. But we also don't know who's coming next, right?
Right.
And what their testimony is. So I think that the prosecution, it's hard to say because we're not in the courtroom, and that's some of the limitation with this particular case. You have to just kind of get it from word of mouth from other people, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to say how these next witnesses are gonna impact the jury, and what their testimony is gonna be.
So we have a poll up on Law and Crime. We always put a bunch of polls up during the course of this case. The question we asked is, who do you think won week one? 67% say the prosecution won week one. 33% say the defense won week one. You think that's a fair assessment of the week, Mina?
think so. I've seen some contradiction online. I've seen, the comments kind of say, where's the crime? This seems like a domestic violence case, but they're getting to it. They've sprinkled in different different elements, bringing in the escorts from a variety of places. I actually have it written down here: prostitutes from Miami, Las Vegas, LA, Ibiza. They've introduced the fact that, Diddy might have blackmailed her by saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to release these freak off videos of you. They've introduced the fact that, when something's going wrong, during the freak off, someone's getting baby oil, or, someone's orchestrating these things and supplying, and kind of, it adds to that organized crime bit. So I think they've had some successes. I do think that it would be wise, to be honest, to put Diddy on the stand. I mean, if I was on this case, I'm not an attorney, but I would put him on. Just it would humanize him, and I think he'd be able to tell his story in his own words, and then help the jury really understand who he is. He's very charismatic. You don't get to be a mogul by not being a people person. So they're painting him as this violent person, which he can be, but there's also another side of him where he's very good with people. You don't have multiple businesses, Sean John, Ciroc, you're representing liquor companies. You don't get to be this person without being a good people person. And I think
Yeah.
it would be wise to let the jury see that.
I guess, Mina, the question becomes, and this is the question, right? If you were abused, Cassandra Ventura, if you were trafficked, Cassandra Ventura, why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you leave? Why did you, even though she said she didn't keep coming back, why did you stay with him? There are cases that our understanding of sexual abuse, and this is allegations here, they've changed over time, Mina, about why alleged victims do these things. And I was in the Harvey Weinstein trial, okay? I mean, I covered it the entire time. And that was a big point of analysis, is that if Weinstein did this to you, why did you stay in contact with him? You can be abused and do that. It's documented. So it becomes a very interesting and important conversation to have, Mina.
There's a psychology behind the abuse that is very important to explain in this particular trial, and any trial involving sexual abuse and trafficking.
We've got a question, Mina, from Janae Hall. Is it likely the defense will have any of his children testify on his behalf?
I wouldn't. As a parent, I wouldn't want to put my children anywhere near this.
Yeah.
Keep them away. Don't open them up to this. Protect them, right? I absolutely would not do that.
Well, if he's convicted and there's a sentencing hearing, I'm sure his children will make statements in some capacity in his side, for sure. I mean, that's something we can expect. You're right, Mina?
I do want to add that there's also things that are unsaid, right? His children being there, his mother being there. Those are all unsaid things. We support you. We believe you. I mean, a lot of the analysis from the reporters are, who's looking where, who's doing what. His daughters, when they were having very graphic testimony about the sexual nature of this trial, his daughters left. All of those things are being watched. The jury can see that. So there's a lot of things that are unsaid, that you don't need to put your child on the stand to say.
First of all, you have alleged victims who are testifying under pseudonyms, so it gives you the idea of the sensitivity of these charges, and you want to make sure that nothing impacts this trial, that none of their identities are revealed that could compromise their testimony in any way. Mina, this is a case where Combs himself has been accused of trying to improperly contact witnesses in this case. So having the witness list sealed in a criminal case like this, not surprising, right?
Right. And also their safety, right? I mean, they're painting this man to be someone that will blow up your car, right? So it's like people might be concerned about their safety. And that's why they wouldn't release the list.
Esteveo asks, I will read Mr. Combs' messages. You're going to make a beautiful mother, God bless. So that's apparently what Combs had written Cassandra Ventura. Ventura responds, I said, thank you, God bless. Mina, what do you make of their exchanges, the loving exchanges between them? What do you think the value of that is?
I mean, there was love there. right? No one's denying that. And I think, as I said before, both things can be true, right? They could have loved each other, and this could have started very innocently. But obviously something went wrong where Cassie feels like she was victimized, and to the point where it's criminal. So both of those things can be true, and the prosecution has to prove um, what the facts are.
I don't know the answer to this one, Mina. This is Legs 7K. Do we know over the years if Cassie had hospital records to show any injuries to back her case? I knew there was something about medical records going into this case. Maybe our producers can check it out, but I don't think so. They would have been asked about it.
Yeah, from my knowledge, nothing was reported. And I think that's the big question that the defense really has to outline. Why? Why did you not report this? Now, you can easily put an expert on the stand and explain why, right? Many people of abuse and sexual trafficking, they have a strange allegiance to the person who's hurting them. And like I said before, it's a psychology to it. So, yeah, there's a reason why there are no medical records, but that's a valid point, and that's something that the defense really needs to hit home. If this horrible thing was happening to you on and off for 10 years, why didn't you document it properly?
I don't know if they're even necessarily fighting that this happened to her, Ben. I mean, there were photographs that were shown. We all saw the 2016 tape. Once you see the 2016 tape, you're like, I believe every instance when she says she was physically abused. They're just, I mean, the truth is, Ben, they're just recharacterizing what this abuse was.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the video is so powerful. It establishes the abuse.
One thing I will say from Cassie's original lawsuit, it said Mr. Combs had Miss Ventura's personal medical records sent directly to his email address. For instance, when Miss Ventura began experiencing memory loss, potentially due to excessive drug use and or head injuries caused by Mr. Combs' beatings, as described below, her MRI results were provided directly to Mr. Combs. Mr. Combs also repeatedly arranged for his staff to drive Miss Ventura to certain doctor's appointments. That's pretty illuminating there, Amina.
I mean, that's the power that we're dealing with here.